My name is Natalie Harper, and the day my own sister tried to throw me out of my own lakeside house was the day I decided I would one day stand on that same porch, hold up a signed agreement in front of her trembling hands, and tell her exactly how much she owed me before I let her back in. When I finally make her sign that paper in front of everyone and watch her lower her eyes for the first time in her life, I'll remember this moment. So tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I want to know who understands what it feels like when family mistakes your kindness for weakness. I was supposed to be coming home to peace. It was late Sunday afternoon in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and the winter air carried that sharp, clean smell that usually made me feel grounded. My lakeside house, white siding, wide porch, big windows facing the water was my sanctuary. I bought it 2 years ago after 10 relentless years climbing the corporate ladder as a project manager for a Chicago tech firm. This house was my proof that hard work paid off. So when I unlocked the front door and heard laughter, low, smug laughter, I knew something was wrong. I stepped inside. Vanessa was curled up on my cream-colored sofa, her long dark hair falling over one shoulder, swirling red wine in one of my crystal glasses. My younger sister, 31, chronically unemployed, allergic to responsibility. Next to her was Trevor, her husband, tall, broad-shouldered, with that permanently amused smirk that always made me feel like I was the punchline. My fireplace was on. My music was playing. And my throw blanket, the one I bought in Vermont last fall, was wrapped around Vanessa's legs. "Oh," she said lightly, as if I'd interrupted her spa day. "You're back already?" I didn't move. "What are you doing in my house?" Trevor leaned back like he owned the air. "Relax, Nat, it's freezing outside." "That's not what I asked." Vanessa took a slow sip of wine. "Mom said you wouldn't mind." "My mother," I said carefully, "does not own this house." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're already starting." "Starting what?" "This," she gestured vaguely at me. "The tone." I set my bag down very deliberately. "Why are you here?" Trevor answered this time. "We needed a place to stay for a while." "For how long?" They exchanged a glance. "Just until we figure some things out," Vanessa said. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. "What things?" "Our lease ended," Trevor shrugged. "And with the baby coming, the baby," I cut in. Vanessa's chin lifted. "Surprise." There it was, the weaponized news. Dropped casually between sips of my wine. "You didn't even ask," I said quietly. Vanessa's expression hardened. "We're family." "Yes," I replied, "which is why you knock." Trevor stood up then, crossing his arms. "Don't make this a scene." "A scene?" I laughed softly. "You broke into my house." "We didn't break in," Vanessa snapped. "Mom gave us the spare key." "Of course she did. The key I gave my parents for emergencies, for storms, for safety, not for invasions." "Give it back," I said. Vanessa stood slowly. "Excuse me, the key." She set her glass down harder than necessary. "You don't get to talk to me like I'm some stranger, and you don't get to treat my home like a vacation rental." Trevor stepped forward. "Natalie, calm down." "No, you calm down, pack your things." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Get out of here or I'll call the police." For a second the room went silent except for the crackling fire. I stared at her, my own sister, in my living room. "Try it," I said evenly, "and you'll regret it." Her jaw tightened. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what? Defend my own property?" Trevor slammed his glass onto the table. "You're being dramatic." "No," I replied, "I'm being clear." Vanessa's voice rose. "You've always been like this, controlling, cold, and you've always assumed I'll clean up your mess." The argument exploded after that, voices bouncing off hardwood floors, doors slamming upstairs as Vanessa stormed down the hallway, Trevor muttering under his breath about uptight control freaks. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart pounding, staring at the lake through the windows. This house was supposed to be my peace. Instead, it had become a battlefield. And as I listened to my sister rummaging through my guest bedroom like it was already hers, I realized something with terrifying clarity. She didn't come here to ask. She came here to take. And I would have to decide whether I was still the sister who tolerated everything or the woman who finally drew a line in her own doorway. That night, the lake outside was still. Inside, the war had just begun. Later that evening, in my own bedroom overlooking the frozen lake, I sat on the edge of my bed trying to steady my breathing while my sister occupied the guest room like she'd won a small war. The house was too loud. Not with music. Not with shouting, with presence. Footsteps I didn't invite, cabinets opening. The faint hum of Trevor's voice downstairs like this was some extended Airbnb stay. I had one goal when I bought this house, peace. A space no one could manipulate, no one could control. Mine. A knock came at my bedroom door, 3 measured taps. Natalie, Trevor's voice. I didn't answer immediately, another knock. Can we talk? I stood, opened the door just enough to see him leaning casually against the hallway wall, hands in his pockets. He looked different without the smirk, almost reasonable. What? I asked. He exhaled. Look, today got heated. That's one word for it. He nodded like I'd just made a clever joke. Vanessa's emotional, you know that. She threatened to call the police on me in my house. He winced slightly. She didn't mean that. She said it. He studied me for a moment. Can we just reset? Reset? I repeated. Yeah, fresh start. Let's just live in peace while we're here, all right. While we're here, not if. I crossed my arms. And how long is while? He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. A few weeks, maybe a couple months. No, he blinked. No, you don't get vague timelines in my house. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Natalie, we don't have anywhere else right now. Vanessa's stressed. The pregnancy. I just found out about the pregnancy tonight. Exactly, it's a lot. I studied his face carefully. Trevor was charming when he wanted something. That was his real talent. He'd worked in sales before bouncing between marketing jobs. He knew how to soften his tone, how to tilt his head just enough to look sincere. What do you want from me? I asked. A truce. Small shrug. No more fighting, no more threats. We'll keep to ourselves, you keep to yourself. And my rules, I said quietly. He gave a cautious smile. What rules? You ask before using anything, you don't invite anyone over, you don't touch my office, you clean up after yourselves, and you contribute financially. He shifted his weight. We're tight right now. Then you're motivated. He let out a breath through his nose. You've always been intense. And you've always confused that with unfair. Silence stretched between us. From downstairs, I heard Vanessa open the refrigerator. A cabinet door slammed. Trevor glanced back, then lowered his voice further. She feels like you look down on her. I don't look down on her, I expect her to grow up. He gave a dry half-laugh. That's the same thing in her mind. I didn't smile, he straightened. Okay, your rules, we'll follow them. All of them, all of them. And this is temporary, I added. Very temporary, he nodded. Fine. I searched his face for defiance, for sarcasm. Instead, he extended his hand like we were closing a business deal. Truce. I looked at his hand for a long second, then I shook it. Truce, I said, but understand something, Trevor. Yeah, if either of you crosses a line again, there won't be another conversation. He held my gaze. Understood. Vanessa's voice echoed from the kitchen. Trevor, where's the good wine opener? My jaw tightened. Trevor gave me a tight smile. We'll work on it. He walked away and I closed my bedroom door slowly. For a moment, the house went quiet again. Not peaceful, just suspended, like fog settling over the lake before a storm. We each claimed corners that night. Vanessa in the guest suite, Trevor on the couch temporarily, me in my bedroom with the door locked, under one roof pretending we weren't at war. But as I lay awake listening to their muffled voices downstairs, I understood something I hadn't admitted yet. A truce only works when both sides respect the battlefield, and my sister had never respected mine. 3 days after the so-called truce, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, staring at an empty almond milk carton like it had personally betrayed me. I always buy 2, one for coffee, one backup. Both were gone. Vanessa sat at the island scrolling through her phone, wearing silk pajamas that definitely hadn't been in her suitcase when she arrived. Did you finish the almond milk? I asked evenly. She didn't look up. Yeah, I needed it for smoothies. All of it? It's just milk, Natalie. It's not just milk, it's mine. That made her look up. There it is, she said, lips curving slightly. The possessiveness. It's called ownership. Trevor walked in behind her, already dressed, carrying his muddy boots in one hand. He dropped them directly on my foyer bench. Wet dirt sprinkled onto the hardwood. I closed my eyes for half a second. Trevor, I said calmly, boots stay on the mat. He glanced down. Oh, right. He didn't move them, Vanessa smirked. You could relax a little, you know. And you could wipe your feet. She leaned back in the stool. You act like this is a hotel. No, I corrected. I act like this isn't. Silence. Then Trevor cleared his throat. We're looking at places. Oh, I folded my arms. Where, just around. That's not an answer, he shrugged. It's a process. Everything with them was a process, a delay, a foggy maybe. By the end of the week, the house felt smaller. Music thumped past midnight from the guest room one evening. Some low bass-heavy playlist that rattled the hallway frames. I knocked. Vanessa opened the door halfway, mascara slightly smudged like I'd interrupted something deeply important. It's midnight, I said. So I have work. She rolled her eyes. You always have work. Yes, I said. That's how mortgages function. Trevor appeared behind her. We'll turn it down. You'll turn it off. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You love control. And you love pretending consequences are optional. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She broke first, shutting the door harder than necessary. The music stopped, but the silence after felt louder. Saturday morning was worse. I walked into my living room to find two unfamiliar coffee cups on the table. Did you have people over? I asked. Vanessa, sprawled on the couch, didn't bother sitting up. Just Lily and Marissa, they were in town. You invited guests. It wasn't a party. That wasn't the rule. Trevor stepped in quickly. They were only here for an hour. It's not the point. Vanessa shot up. Why do you make everything a courtroom? Because I shouldn't have to argue for basic respect in my own home. Her voice dropped, sharper now. Maybe if you didn't act superior all the time, people would respect you more naturally. That one landed. Superior, I repeated. You bought a house by a lake and never let anyone forget it. I worked for it. And you think that makes you better? I felt my chest tight. No, I think it makes me responsible. Trevor raised both hands slightly. Okay, let's not spiral. Vanessa laughed under her breath. See, spiral, everything with you is dramatic. I looked around the room, my books slightly rearranged, my throw pillows crushed, my piece chipped away in small, deliberate scratches. Vanessa, I said quietly, this isn't a hotel. She smiled without warmth. You're always so uptight. There it was again, that narrative, not that she crossed lines, that I reacted to them. I stepped closer. You know what's interesting? What? You call me uptight every time I ask for something basic, like sleep or privacy or asking before using my things. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. We said we'd follow the rules. And you're not. Vanessa grabbed her phone. I can't live like this, I laughed softly. You're not living like this, you're staying like this. That hit, her eyes flashed. You think you're better than me, she said, voice trembling now, not weak but furious. I think I'm done being your safety net. The room went still. For a split second, I saw something flicker in Trevor's face. Concern, calculation. Vanessa stood slowly. You're unbelievable. No, I said evenly. I'm awake. She brushed past me, shoulder bumping mine on purpose. The guest room door slammed seconds later. Trevor lingered. She's stressed, he said quietly. So am I, he nodded once. We'll do better. I didn't answer, because I'd heard that before. That afternoon, I stood on the deck alone, staring at the lake. From outside, the house looked serene, still, beautiful. Inside, it felt like a pressure cooker. And the worst part wasn't the almond milk, or the boots, or the music. It was the steady, calculated erosion of boundaries, death by 1,000 tiny dismissals. I had opened my door to family, but they weren't living here. They were testing how far they could push, and I had to decide how long I was willing to let them. It was Friday night in my lakeside home, and I knew something was wrong the second I turned into my driveway and saw headlights lining the curb like it was a public venue. Music pulsed through the walls before I even reached the porch. Not background music, party music. I opened the front door to heat, perfume, laughter, and strangers. At least 15 people were scattered across my living room. Shoes kicked off near my entryway. Someone leaning against my kitchen counter. A girl I didn't recognize dancing barefoot near the fireplace. My fireplace. Vanessa stood in the center of it, all wearing a tight emerald dress, holding up a champagne bottle like she was hosting New Year's Eve. Oh my God, she said when she saw me. You're home already? Trevor appeared beside her, cheeks flushed. Nat, hey, so, small thing. What, I asked slowly, is this? Vanessa laughed nervously. It's just a few friends. I scanned the room. A man I'd never seen before was pouring tequila into glasses. On my hardwood. With my liquor? I asked. Vanessa's smile thinned. You weren't using it. That's not an answer. A girl brushed past me and nearly knocked into the console table by the door. I stepped fully inside. Everyone out. Music kept blasting. Vanessa's expression shifted. Don't embarrass me. You're embarrassing yourself. Trevor moved closer. Let's not make a scene. A scene, I repeated. You invited strangers into my house. They're not strangers, Vanessa snapped. They're my friends. I don't care if they're senators, they don't live here. A tall guy near the couch looked between us awkwardly. Should we? Yes, I said clearly. You should. Vanessa grabbed my arm. Stop it. I pulled my arm back. You crossed a line. You're so dramatic, she hissed. It's one night, it's my house. The music suddenly cut off. Everyone turned. I was holding my phone. I'm calling the police. Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa stared at me. You wouldn't. I dialed anyway. Hi, I said calmly when the dispatcher answered. I need officers at my address. There's an unauthorized party in my home and I want everyone removed. Trevor's face drained of color. Natalie, hang up. I held his gaze. No, Vanessa's voice rose. You are unbelievable. And you are done. Within 10 minutes, red and blue lights reflected off the lake like a warning flare. The officers entered with steady authority. Whose residence? One asked. Mine, I said. I did not consent to this gathering. Vanessa tried to interrupt. She's my sister, ma'am, the officer said firmly. Are you the homeowner? Vanessa fell silent. The officer turned back to me. You want them removed? Yes. One by one, the guests shuffled out, avoiding eye contact. Some muttered apologies, others glared at Vanessa. Shoes were grabbed, jackets thrown on hastily. The living room emptied. Vanessa stood frozen in the center, humiliated. This was cruel, she said quietly. No, I replied. This was necessary. Trevor lingered after the last guest left. I'm sorry, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I told her to keep it small. I laughed once. You think this is about size? He glanced around at the mess, sticky counters, crushed cushions, a red wine stain beginning to bloom near the rug. It got out of hand, he admitted. Yes, I said softly. It did. Vanessa stormed past both of us, heels clicking sharply down the hallway before her door slammed hard enough to rattle a frame. The house fell quiet. The officers gave me a brief nod before leaving. I stood at the door like a general watching an invading army retreat. Trevor bent down and picked up a handful of discarded napkins. I'll help clean, he said. I studied him carefully. Why? He hesitated. Because this wasn't fair to you. For the first time since they arrived, I saw something different in him. Not arrogance, not charm, embarrassment. We cleaned mostly in silence. He wiped counters, I gathered glasses. At one point he paused. She hates feeling small. She hates consequences, I corrected. He didn't argue. When the last trash bag was tied, the house felt bruised but reclaimed. Vanessa didn't come out again that night. Trevor stood awkwardly near the hallway. Thank you for not escalating it further. I met his eyes. Don't mistake restraint for weakness. He gave a small nod. I won't. When he disappeared into the guest room, I locked the front door. For the first time since this began, I felt it. A win, not loud, not triumphant, but real. I had drawn a line and held it. And as I stood alone in my living room, smelling faint traces of champagne and consequence, I realized something important. They had underestimated me. And that was their first mistake. The morning after the party, my lakeside house was unnaturally quiet, like it was recovering from a fever. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching faint streaks on the hardwood where strangers had stood hours before. I was at the kitchen sink with a mug of black coffee when I heard the soft hum of a drill. I froze. Then I remembered. The loose cabinet hinge. I stepped into the hallway and found Trevor kneeling in front of the lower kitchen cabinet, toolbox open beside him. What are you doing? I asked. He glanced up. Fixing this, it's been crooked since we got here. It was not crooked before you got here. He gave a faint, almost sheepish smile. Fair, the drill word briefly. He tightened the hinge and closed the cabinet carefully. It aligned perfectly. There, he said. Better, I studied him. Why? He wiped his hands on a rag. Because last night was a mess, and you were right. That wasn't something I heard often. You didn't have to call the police, he added quickly, like he couldn't let the full concession stand alone. Yes, I said calmly, I did. He didn't argue this time. Vanessa hadn't come out of the guest room yet. Around 9 I heard her door open. She walked past the kitchen without looking at either of us, phone glued to her hand. Morning, Trevor offered. She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and disappeared onto the back deck. Trevor exhaled quietly. She's embarrassed. She should be. He leaned against the counter. Vanessa's a little impulsive. That's a generous word. He gave a half shrug. She respects you more than she shows. I let out a short breath. Respect isn't silent, Trevor. He considered that. She's always felt compared to you, he said carefully. Your job, the house, the lake. I never asked for comparisons. Doesn't mean she didn't feel them. I leaned back against the opposite counter. So I'm supposed to shrink so she feels taller? No, he shook his head. Just understand it's not always about you trying to control things. I met his eyes. It is about me when it's my property. Silence settled between us. Then he surprised me again. Coffee, he asked. I hesitated. You're making it. Already did. He gestured to the pot. I set it for 6, thought you'd be up early. I walked over, poured myself a cup. It was strong, exactly how I drink it. That doesn't change anything, I said quietly. I know. You still need to be looking for a place. We are, and contributing. He nodded. I transferred what we could this morning. My phone buzzed seconds later. A payment notification, not large but real. I didn't thank him, I just looked at him. He held my gaze without smirking this time. Vanessa came back inside then, sliding her sunglasses up onto her head. Are you two bonding now? She asked flatly. No, I replied. Trevor stepped aside. I fixed the cabinet, she shrugged. Cool. Her indifference was almost worse than her anger. She sat at the island, scrolling again, thumbs moving quickly. You okay? Trevor asked gently. I'm fine, she said sharply. You sure? She looked at me instead of him. You love this, don't you? Love what? Being right, being the responsible one. I kept my voice steady. I love my house being respected. She laughed under her breath. You act like we're criminals. No, I said quietly. I act like this is temporary. That hit. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. The rest of the week passed in a strange, uneasy rhythm. Trevor walked the dog without being asked. He took out the trash. He even replaced the wine-stained rug without mentioning it. Vanessa, meanwhile, floated through the house like a guest who refused to acknowledge she'd overstayed. One morning, as I left for work, Trevor handed me a small travel mug. Refill, he said, for the road. I looked at it, then at him. Don't mistake courtesy for leverage, I warned. He gave a small nod. Wouldn't dream of it. Driving down the quiet road that curved along the lake, I couldn't decide what unsettled me more, the open hostility from Vanessa, or the quiet shift in Trevor. Because alliances inside a house like this don't just form by accident. And I had a feeling this calm wasn't peace. It was repositioning. It was Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting in my home office overlooking the gray, wind-brushed lake when my phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Marjorie. We don't talk often, which is why I answered. Natalie, sweetheart, she said, her voice unusually stiff. I just wanted to check in. About, I asked carefully, a pause. Well, Vanessa mentioned there's been some tension. Of course she had. We're fine, I replied evenly. Another pause, longer this time. She said you kicked her out of her own family home. I actually laughed. My family home, I repeated. She told us you changed the locks, that you're forcing her and Trevor out when she's pregnant. I leaned back slowly in my chair. She moved into my house without permission, I said. And yes, I set boundaries. Well, my aunt sighed, you've always been strong-willed. There it was, the polite word for difficult. After we hung up, 2 more calls followed. Cousin Elise, then Uncle Ron, same tone, cool, careful, like I was unstable. By the 4th call, I stopped explaining. Instead, I listened. She's devastated, Natalie. She said you humiliated her in front of friends. Family should help each other. Not one of them asked what happened from my side, not one. When I walked downstairs that evening, Vanessa was at the kitchen island again, scrolling. Trevor stood at the sink rinsing dishes. I placed my phone face down on the counter. Busy day? Vanessa asked lightly. Very, I said. Trevor glanced between us. I got 3 calls from relatives today, I continued, all repeating the same story. Vanessa didn't look up. People care. You told them I kicked you out of your own home. She finally raised her eyes, calm, cold. Well, she said, didn't you? This isn't your home, she shrugged. It's our family home. Mom and Dad have keys. We've all spent holidays here. That does not make it communal property. Trevor stepped in quietly. Vanessa, she ignored him. They deserve to know how you treated me, she said. Treated you, I repeated. You threw a party in my house without permission. And you called the police, she shot back. Like I was some criminal. You crossed a line. You overreacted. The words bounced between us like they'd been rehearsed. I stepped closer. You told them I'm selfish. Maybe they just finally see you for who you are. That one cut. I felt it physically. Trevor set the dish towel down slowly. Let's not, no, I said quietly, eyes locked on hers. Let's. Vanessa stood now, chin lifted. You've always acted superior, she said. Like you're better because you have this house and this job. I never said that, you don't have to say it. So you punish me for succeeding? My voice didn't rise, it hardened. She laughed without humor. Oh please, everything has to revolve around you, your rules, your schedule, your precious peace. It's my house. And I'm your sister. That doesn't give you the right to rewrite reality. Silence dropped between us. Trevor rubbed his temples. Vanessa, maybe we shouldn't have. Stop defending her, she snapped at him. He went quiet. I looked at both of them. You're twisting everything, I said to her. She folded her arms. Maybe people just finally see you clearly. The betrayal wasn't in the words. It was in the intention. She wasn't just defending herself. She was building a narrative, and I was the villain. I picked up my phone again. One more thing, I said evenly. If you're going to involve the entire family in our conflict, understand this. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. I won't stay silent. Her expression flickered just for a second, then the mask returned. Do whatever you want, she said. Trevor avoided my eyes. As I walked back upstairs, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't about cabinets or milk or parties. This was about reputation, control, positioning. Vanessa wasn't just living in my house. She was trying to live inside my story. And if I didn't take control of that narrative soon, she would rewrite it completely. It was Thursday evening and I stood in my own foyer holding a new set of keys while the last light of day faded over the lake. Vanessa and Trevor had gone out for groceries, or so they said. The house was quiet, still, almost innocent. I turned the new key in the front door lock and felt the solid click of metal aligning with metal. The locksmith, a calm middle-aged man named Dennis, packed up his tools. All set, ma'am, all exterior locks replaced. New codes on the keypad too. Thank you, I said, handing him payment. You sure about this? He asked gently, glancing at the boxed belongings stacked neatly by the entryway. I nodded. Very. After he left, I stood there for a long moment staring at the boxes. I hadn't thrown their things onto the lawn. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had folded clothes carefully. Packed toiletries, included chargers, even labeled each box, temporary essentials, because I wasn't cruel, I was done. When headlights swept across the front windows, my heart didn't race, it settled. I stepped back from the door, the car engine cut off, footsteps approached. The key slid into the lock, paused, jiggled again, then harder. What the Trevor's voice? Vanessa tried next. It stuck. The knob rattled. I walked forward slowly and flipped on the porch light. Their silhouettes sharpened through the frosted glass. Natalie, Vanessa called. The door won't open. I opened the inner door but kept the storm door locked between us. I know, I said calmly. They both froze. Trevor looked at the boxes first, then at me. You changed the locks? He asked quietly. Yes, Vanessa's face flushed instantly. Are you insane? No, she dropped the grocery bag at her feet. Open the door. You've crossed too many lines, Vanessa. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Can't just lock us out. I can. Trevor stepped forward, palms raised. Natalie, let's talk about this. We have talked, I replied. Several times. This is extreme, he said. What's extreme is rewriting reality and dragging the family into it. Vanessa let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So this is about that. It's about all of it. She stepped closer to the door. I'm pregnant. And that doesn't give you permission to manipulate me. Her face hardened. Open the door. No. Trevor ran a hand through his hair. At least let us grab our things. They're right there. I nodded to the boxes. Essentials, the rest can be scheduled for pickup. Vanessa stared at the neatly stacked boxes like they'd personally insulted her. You packed my stuff, she whispered. Yes, you went through my things. I organized what was already in my house. Her breathing quickened. You're unbelievable. No, I said evenly. I'm setting a boundary. She stepped back and looked toward the neighboring houses, aware of porch lights flickering on. A curtain shifted across the street. Trevor lowered his voice. This doesn't need to be public. You made it public, I replied. Remember, Vanessa's composure cracked. This is my family too, she shouted. You don't get to exile me. I'm not exiling you, I said calmly. I'm protecting my home. She grabbed one of the boxes and nearly dropped it. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "I doubt that." Trevor picked up 2 boxes silently. He looked at me once, longer this time. Not angry, measured. "We'll call you," he said. "For scheduling pickup," I clarified. Vanessa spun toward him. "Don't act like this is reasonable." He didn't answer her. Instead, he walked toward the car. Vanessa lingered 1 second longer. "This isn't over," she said quietly, venom wrapped in composure. "I know," I replied. She slammed the car door so hard it echoed down the street. The engine roared to life. And then silence. I stood on the porch until their taillights disappeared beyond the curve of the lake road. Behind me, the house felt different. Not empty, reclaimed. Inside, I locked the storm door and leaned my forehead briefly against the wood. My hands were steady. Outside, a neighbor's porch light switched off. The spectacle was over. But as I walked back into my living room, I knew something deeper had shifted. This wasn't just eviction. It was a declaration. And declarations have consequences. The lake outside reflected the porch light like a single unblinking eye. Watching. Waiting. 3 days after I changed the locks, I was standing in my kitchen slicing lemons for water when the doorbell rang again. Not a polite ring. A long, pressing demand. I didn't rush. When I opened the inner door and looked through the glass, Vanessa stood on the porch with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Trevor was a step behind her, face pale, unreadable. I didn't unlock it. "What do you want?" I asked through the door. Vanessa's eyes were rimmed red, but not swollen, controlled tears. "You think you can just throw me out," she began, voice trembling, "and not help me anymore?" I said nothing. "Fine," she continued, lifting her chin. "Guess what? I'm pregnant." The words landed heavy in the cold air. I didn't move. Trevor shifted slightly behind her but didn't contradict it. "How far?" I asked calmly. She blinked, clearly not expecting a question instead of shock. "What? How far along?" "A few weeks." "Doctor confirmed?" Her jaw tightened. "Yes." "Which doctor?" "Natalie, stop it," Trevor muttered softly. "I'm asking basic questions." Vanessa's composure cracked. "Why are you interrogating me? I'm telling you I'm carrying your niece or nephew, and I'm asking for clarity." Her hands balled into fists. "You're heartless." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm cautious." Trevor stepped forward slightly. "We found out before the party." That detail slid into place like a missing puzzle piece. "So you knew," I said slowly, "and still threw a party." Vanessa's lips parted but no answer came. "You didn't mention it when I locked you out," I continued. "I shouldn't have to use my pregnancy as a weapon," she snapped. The irony almost made me laugh. "Then don't," I said. Silence fell between us. The lake behind them was still, gray under winter light. Vanessa tried again, this time softer. "We need stability. You have your parents. They're overwhelmed." "That's not my responsibility," her eyes flashed. "Family takes care of family. Family doesn't manipulate family." Trevor finally spoke with more force. "We're not manipulating you." "Then why bring this up now?" He didn't answer. Vanessa's voice dropped to a near whisper. "You would really let your pregnant sister struggle?" I held her gaze steadily. "I will not let myself be cornered." The words were quiet but firm. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. Maybe she didn't. For years, I would have folded at this point, offered the guest room back, apologized for overreacting. But something inside me had shifted. Pregnancy or not did not erase months of disrespect. It did not rewrite the narrative she had spread to our family. Trevor exhaled slowly. "What do you want from us?" "Accountability," I said. "Truth, and boundaries respected." Vanessa shook her head slowly. "You're unbelievable." "And you're not powerless," I replied. "You're an adult." A long, heavy pause, then Vanessa straightened her shoulders. "Fine," she said, wiping at her cheek. "Don't help us." She turned sharply toward the steps. Trevor lingered 1 second longer, searching my face for something: softness, doubt, guilt. He didn't find it. "Congratulations," I said evenly, "if it's true." Vanessa spun around. "You think I'm lying?" "I think timing matters." Her face burned with fury. "You've changed," she said. "No," I answered quietly. "I've stopped bending." She walked down the porch steps without another word. The car door slammed, and just like that, the silence returned. But this time it felt heavier, because pregnancy changes stakes. Even if it doesn't change truth. I closed the door slowly, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. For the first time since this began, I felt a flicker of doubt, not about my boundaries, but about how far this would go. Because if she was telling the truth, This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about a child entering a war neither of us had finished fighting. The morning after Vanessa's pregnancy announcement, I sat in a quiet booth at Harbor Street Diner, the kind of place that smelled permanently like coffee and toasted bread, and waited for Daniel Brooks to slide into the seat across from me. Daniel wasn't just an old college friend, he was now a contracts attorney in Milwaukee and one of the few people who never confused emotion with legality. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, loosening his scarf. "I didn't," I replied. "I need clarity." I laid everything out: the move-in, the party, the lock change, the pregnancy reveal. Daniel listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under his chin. "First," he said finally, "you followed the law, you gave notice. You didn't destroy property, you didn't deny access to belongings. And the pregnancy is irrelevant to property rights." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "So I'm not obligated to—" "No," he cut in gently. "You're not financially obligated to an adult sibling, pregnant or not." The word adult settled heavily in my chest. "That's what this is really about," I said quietly. "She's still being treated like she's 15. And you've been treated like the parent," he replied. "Exactly." When I got back to the lake house that afternoon, Vanessa and Trevor were already waiting in the driveway. They must have known my schedule. I stepped out of my car slowly. Vanessa crossed her arms. Trevor leaned against the hood. "We need to talk," she said. "I agree," I replied calmly. We met later at the same diner, neutral ground. The tension at the table was thick but contained. Trevor spoke first. "We can't afford a place right now." "With the baby, you can," I interrupted gently. "You just don't want to adjust your lifestyle." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "That's unfair." "No," I said evenly. "What's unfair is expecting me to subsidize your choices." She leaned forward. "So that's it, you're cutting us off." "Yes." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Trevor went pale. "Natalie, I'm not your safety net anymore." Vanessa's voice trembled, not with sadness but with anger. "You're turning your back on family." "I'm turning toward self-respect." Silence. Waitresses moved around us. Cups clinked. Life continued. "You'll either grow up," I continued quietly, "or fall apart, but I won't cushion either outcome." Vanessa stood abruptly, chair scraping. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I've stopped carrying everyone." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Trevor remained seated, staring into his coffee like it held instructions. "You're serious," he said finally. "Yes," he nodded once. Slowly. Then he stood and followed her out without another word. I stayed behind for a few minutes, letting the quiet settle around me. Outside, the lake wind was sharp and cold. But for the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear. Not cruel, not triumphant, just steady. And sometimes, steady is stronger than loud. 2 weeks later, on a crisp Saturday evening, my house was finally warm again, not from invasion but from laughter. I had invited a few close friends from Chicago to spend the weekend by the lake. Nothing extravagant, just comfort food, board games, and a fire in the fireplace that actually felt earned this time. Maya was curled up on the armchair with a glass of wine. Daniel was arguing with my neighbor Chris about the best way to grill salmon. The air smelled like rosemary and butter. It felt like mine again. I was in the kitchen refilling a bowl of popcorn when the pounding started. Not knocking. Pounding. The entire house froze. 3 violent hits against the front door. Maya looked at me. "Are you expecting someone?" "No," another slam. Then Vanessa's voice, sharp and unfiltered. "Natalie, open the door." The room went silent. I set the bowl down slowly and walked toward the entryway. Through the frosted glass, I saw her silhouette, wild hair, arms flailing. Trevor stood slightly behind her, tense but not intervening. I didn't open the door. "What do you want?" I asked through it. "You think you can just replace us," she shouted. "Like we don't exist." Behind me, I could feel my friends standing but keeping distance, giving me space. "This isn't a replacement," I replied calmly. "It's my home." She slammed her palm against the door again. "You don't get to erase me." "I'm not erasing you. You locked me out, you cut me off, you humiliated me. You did that yourself." Her breathing was heavy now, unsteady. "You're not family anymore," she screamed. Words echoed across the lake. I unlocked the inner door but kept the storm door closed between us. I stepped outside onto the porch, closing the door gently behind me. Cold air hit my face. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on one by one. "You want a scene?" she demanded. "No," I said quietly, "but I'm not hiding." Trevor stepped forward. Vanessa, let's go, she shook him off. She thinks she's better than us. I think I deserve peace, I said evenly. You owe me, she shouted. For what? For being your sister. I stepped down one porch step so we were eye level. I don't owe you my house, I said clearly. I don't owe you my money and I don't owe you my silence. Her face twisted with fury. This was supposed to be ours too. No, I replied, it was never yours. Silence fell between us, thick and electric. Inside the house, I could see my friends watching through the window, concerned but trusting me. Vanessa's voice dropped, trembling now. You think you've won. This isn't about winning. Then what is it about? It's about you stopping this. Trevor touched her arm gently. We need to go. She jerked away, but her energy had shifted, less explosive, more desperate. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. Trevor finally managed to guide her toward the car. She looked back once before getting in, not angry, not crying, just stunned. The engine started, they drove off. I stood there until the taillights disappeared beyond the trees. Then I turned back to my house. My porch, my people. When I stepped inside, Maya wrapped me in a hug without a word. Daniel handed me a glass of wine. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded, because I was. For the first time since this began, I hadn't reacted. I hadn't defended. I had simply stated the truth. And sometimes the strongest boundary isn't loud. It's calm. Outside, the lake was still. Inside, so was I the next morning. The lake was quiet again, pale sunlight stretching across the frozen surface like nothing had happened the night before. I was on the back deck with a mug of coffee when I heard a car door close softly in the driveway. Not a slam, soft. When I walked around to the front, Trevor was standing there alone. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Can we talk? He asked. I didn't invite him in. Here is fine. He nodded, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked tired, not defensive, not charming, just worn down. We messed up, he said plainly. That's vague, he swallowed. We lost the apartment deposit, Vanessa's parents won't let us move back in, and we don't have many options left. That's not an apology. He looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. The words were steady. Behind him, the passenger door opened slowly. Vanessa stepped out. She didn't look at me right away. When she did, her voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. We lost everything, she said quietly. I see that now. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. No yelling, I asked. She shook her head faintly. No accusations, another shake. I studied her carefully. Pride had always sat on her shoulders like armor. Today it wasn't there. What do you want? I asked. A chance, Trevor said. Temporary, we'll follow every rule, put it in writing. Vanessa nodded, jaw tight but not combative. Whatever you say, whatever you say. I didn't respond immediately. The wind lifted slightly off the lake, brushing my hair back from my face. You don't come back into my house, I said slowly. You stay in the guest cottage. They both looked relieved instantly. Rent, on time, I continued. Yes, Trevor said quickly. Chores assigned, no guests, no financial requests, and if one boundary is crossed, you leave the same day. Vanessa swallowed. Okay. I went inside, returned with a notepad, and wrote every condition down clearly. Then I added one more line. Respect is not negotiable. I handed it to Trevor. He read it carefully, then passed it to Vanessa. She hesitated only a second before signing. Trevor signed next. When they handed the paper back, their hands were steady. I folded it once. You can move into the cottage this afternoon, I said. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but structure. And sometimes, structure is the only bridge left standing. As they walked toward the car to unload what little they had left, I stood on the porch holding the signed paper. This time the boundary wasn't just spoken. It was inked. 3 weeks later, I walked through my house barefoot at sunrise, and for the first time in months it felt steady. Not tense, not guarded, steady. The guest cottage lights were already on. Through the trees, I could see Trevor carrying a toolbox toward the dock. He'd started picking up small repair jobs around town, nothing glamorous but consistent, predictable. Inside my kitchen, the counters were clean, the cabinets aligned. The almond milk, both cartons, sat untouched where I'd left them. Structure had changed everything. Vanessa kept mostly to the cottage, but the hostility had drained out of her like air from a punctured tire. Not dramatic, not loud, just quieter. One afternoon, I found her kneeling in the garden bed near the side of the house, pulling weeds carefully. You don't have to do that, I said. She didn't look up at first. It was on the list. The list. The printed copy of responsibilities taped inside the cottage door. Rent due dates, shared property rules, maintenance expectations, adult language. I'm keeping my word, she added softly. I studied her for a long moment. And that matters, I said. At evening, Trevor knocked gently before entering the main house. Can I? He asked, holding up a small tray. On it sat 3 mugs of tea. For the record, he said carefully, we know this is a privilege, not a right. Vanessa stood behind him, hands folded in front of her. I didn't understand that before, she admitted quietly. There was no sarcasm in her voice, no performance, just tired honesty. I won't pretend everything's fixed, I said. She nodded. I don't expect it to be. We sat at the kitchen table, not as enemies, not as best friends, but as adults navigating new ground. Later that night, when they returned to the cottage, I stood alone by the window overlooking the lake. Peace hadn't come from forgiveness. It had come from boundaries, from paper and ink, from finally deciding that love didn't require self-erasure. The house felt like mine again, not because they were gone, but because I had stopped giving pieces of it away. And as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I realized something simple and solid. Respect isn't restored with emotion. It's restored with consistency. And for the first time in a long time, consistency was on my side. A year later, I stood on my deck at sunset with a glass of sparkling water in my hand, watching soft golden light spill across the lake. The house behind me had been renovated that spring. Fresh paint, refinished floors, new garden beds lining the walkway. Not because it was damaged, but because it was mine. Tonight was my official housewarming. Friends filled the living room again, Maya laughing near the fireplace, Daniel debating travel plans with Chris' soft music humming in the background. No tension, no walking on eggshells, just warmth. Vanessa wasn't there. She'd moved into a small townhouse across town 6 months ago. Trevor had steady work now. The baby, a little girl named Claire, had arrived in early summer. Instead of showing up, Vanessa had sent a card. It sat on my kitchen counter all evening. I waited until most of the guests had drifted onto the deck before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Thanks for the push I didn't know I needed. No dramatic apology, no long explanation, just that. I read it twice. Then I smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just calm. Trevor had kept his word before they left the cottage. Rent paid, repairs handled. No crossed lines. Vanessa had kept hers too, even when pride clearly choked her. Growth hadn't been loud, it had been gradual, and it had required something I once avoided: distance. Maya stepped beside me on the deck, nudging my shoulder. You look peaceful. I am, I said honestly. She glanced toward the water. Worth it, I thought about the slammed doors, the police lights, the porch confrontations. Then I thought about the signed paper, the quiet mornings, the steady boundaries. Yes, I said. Because dignity doesn't arrive wrapped in forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with a locked door. I slipped Vanessa's card into a drawer near the kitchen, close enough to remember, far enough to not live inside it. As the sun dipped lower and laughter drifted out across the lake, I realized something simple and powerful. Family isn't who occupies your space. It's who respects it. And for the first time in my life, my home reflected exactly that. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you would have locked that door too.